Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free by visiting achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today we've got JD Clarke from Ivey Business School at Western University. And JD, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. So, as Tyler mentioned, my name is JD. I'm the Executive Director in Recruitment and Admissions here at the Ivey Business School. I've been involved in working in business schools for probably 25 years now. So, lots of experience and really in the work that we do in helping candidates decide what type of program they should do and helping advise them in any way we can. Here at Ivey, just to give you a quick thing, we have a full-time MBA program. We have a full-time Masters of Science program located on our campus in London, Ontario, which is halfway between Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and Detroit. The halfway point, about 2 hours between the two of those cities. And then we also have a campus in downtown Toronto where we offer programs that you do while you work. So we have an executive MBA, an accelerated MBA program that's there. And we also have a Master of Management programs as well. So happy to be with you,
Great.
Tyler, and excited about this topic.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because I think that especially nowadays, figuring out whether an MBA is right for you, and then also with sort of the plethora of options as far as formats, I think it's, something that's a lot more of a question mark today than it used to be, right? I think it's become more flexible, which is great, but it also means that there's more options, which
Yeah.
people need to figure out. And so one of the things I wanted to first talk about was just like, what are the most compelling reasons to pursue an MBA today? Because I do think that there's a lot of uncertainty right now with like AI and, um, just generally a lot of shifts happening, I think in white collar work in particular. And it's also kind of a tough job market. So I'm curious
Yeah.
what you feel
Right.
like are the biggest reasons to pursue an MBA right now.
Yeah, I'm going to talk very surface level, and then I'll talk specifically maybe around AI because I think that's really important. The reasons people do it, there's a whole gamut of it, right? So, but I'll kind of bucket them together. The first is this idea of career acceleration. I like what I'm doing, but I want to kind of accelerate my career path within my industry or my field. So I see
Mhm.
more senior level roles. I don't feel like maybe I have the capability or I want to make myself more competitive, so I'm going to come back and do an MBA program. The other aspect is switching careers, and this could come down to AI. I mean, there's no secret that people with a coding background that were in high demand, we're starting to see that shrink. There's a commoditization of white collar work that's happening. And so some
Mhm.
people are thinking of like, I want to go back and do an MBA because the skill sets that I have around analysis and coding, things like that can be commoditized with AI is being replaced. And so I need to come back to do an MBA to maybe think of another career path where there's critical thinking skills and things that can't be replaced by AI. And then there's some sort of, I would say, secondary reasons. I want to develop my leadership skills because a big part of doing an MBA program is developing the leadership skills. And I also
Mhm.
want to build a network. Where you see that network building come into play is very much international students that, their goal is for us to come to Canada and then settle in Canada afterwards, working and staying. And a good way to do that is to come to do an MBA program. You get education in sort of, and then you automatically get a network from there. So I would say those are sort of the common reasons that you see people do one. I'm going to use an analogy just to kind of wrap it up. Is that one of the things I think about is I was doing an info session a couple of years ago, and somebody talked about the value of an MBA program. And they said, I really debated about whether to do one because, I've always been, and the same with my classmates, very invested in their own development on the job training. And they said getting an MBA was like getting 15 years of experience. So, where I imagine my capabilities 15 years down the road, I got it in a very
Mhm.
structured environment and a very much a learning environment where I walked away with that experience. I feel like my career path is 15 years ahead of where it was.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that certainly sounds like a good reason.
Yeah.
I think maybe the next thing then is just like, you know, when while I definitely empathize with the idea that you can kind of get an accelerator on your experience going through an MBA program. You are also giving up like real job experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you're giving up 2 years on the job if you're doing a full-time program. So how would you like help people figure out whether the MBA is the right choice or whether it's more things like, on the jobs training or like some other kind of leadership institute or things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the individual. The MBA is a much more structured learning environment than just picking up a course here or there. And you actually, there's also the experience aspect of doing an MBA, right? And the network and the cohort experience that might be there. So, really, what we start with, and we spend a lot of time because I think partly, back to your point at the beginning, there's two decisions people make, right? Is an MBA worth it, or maybe it's something else? And then when you kind of narrow down, here's the pathway I want to do, then it comes down to which format fits the best for me. But when it comes down to should I just stay on the job or should I do an MBA, it really is an individual discussion where you get to know the person's goals, maybe what they are doing in their organization. I mean, this might sound a bit corny, but I think it's true. Is like, I always say to people, I'm not a career coach, but this is sort of my career advice is you don't mess with happiness,
Right.
right? If you're happy with what you're doing and you really like what you're doing and you see growth and you see challenge, then maybe taking those courses work. But if you're not happy with what you're doing and you're not getting challenged, then it's maybe time to think that to do an MBA.
Well, right. And I also think that, it's MBAs are a good opportunity to like change your scenery, right? I think that's kind
Yeah.
of what you're alluding to.
It's like a
Um,
software update, right? A big
mhm.
software update. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also, you mentioned the software update. I mean, it is also costly, right? Like it takes
yeah.
up the opportunity cost of time and it also takes money. So how do what advice do you have for people to kind of calculate the ROI of an MBA? Like the ROI meaning return on investment, but basically like how do you help people understand what they're going to be getting out of it and how that compares to the cost and whether it's going to be worth it for them?
Yeah, so this is interesting if you think about other professional schools, right? So you think about medical school, dentistry, law school. There's a very clear defined path with those schools, right? I get a law degree. What type of law am I going to practice? I'm going to get a medical degree. What kind of medical professional specialty that I'm going to go into? And so it's a much more sort of clear, defined pathway. Doing an MBA program or going to do a professional, you're coming out to be a business professional and a business expert. That can take you many different ways. I would say when I work with people on the ROI is that, a lot of people will focus on the employment reports that are the jobs right there, right? And I get that. It's like, I'm leaving, that's a data point that we have and a data point that we collect. But the real payoff for an MBA is 5 to 10 years down the road. And, it's really that people, this isn't like the job that they take post MBA isn't going to be their career path for their life. This is about, like, I did my MBA, and to be quite honest, what I wanted to do it for is that, first of all, I had a history undergraduate degree. I had no formal business training. So I wanted to do an MBA because I was interested in business, but I also wanted a career in business, and I was worried about, here's the pathway that's going to define you. I also wanted to make sure that I have opportunities to change my career moving forward because you never know. And I was the first in my family to go to university. I also wanted to make sure that I had flexibility moving forward in my career path, and that's what an MBA. I know that I get job opportunities come up because I have an MBA behind me. And so, I think the long term mobility, I think, the network that you develop. I did my MBA 15 years ago, and the network is still as strong as ever. And also that ability to kind of, an MBA, when I did an MBA, no one was teaching AI, no one was teaching fintech. But I also got the skill set to kind of learn about those things as I go on, right? So, how does it impact business? Understand it, understand the concept of it. An MBA is really preparing people for a workplace of the future that we have no idea what it's going to exist.
Mhm.
But I think the key
Yeah.
thing is look long term more than short term.
Yeah, and I wanted to dig in on that a little bit. Like, how do MBAs prepare you for the world that doesn't exist? Because or maybe
Yeah, that's a
even
good question.
like, is it better than just doing the work in the world, right? Because I would be nervous that you guys are teaching kind of present day stuff and for the next 2 years at best, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna give sort of an answer and then give an example around it. So, an MBA is going to give you knowledge that automatically leads to judgment, but you also want to come out with wisdom. And what I mean by wisdom, it's that ability to look in the future and that ability to understand what are the risks, what are the opportunities, how can I do it. So when COVID hit, we had some of our senior alumni executives come in and speak to the students. And, one of them said, I didn't go to business school and learn how to deal with a global pandemic. There was no course on that.
Hmm.
Absolutely nothing. But what it did teach me is it did teach me what are the risks in here, what are the opportunities, and allowed me to kind of bring that direction into the organization. And so I think that, it's really about giving you that concept of wisdom and giving you that. So, MBA school is about teaching you models, right? But not all
Right.
models fit perfectly in situations. Sometimes the situation you apply can evolve with technology that's changing and everything else. So, wisdom teaches you how to be adaptable, it teaches you how to be forward thinking, and regardless of what's out there.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I wanted to also, I wanted to dig in on some more sort of logistical details here. First
Yeah,
off, like, what advice do you have for people on when they should do their MBA, like the timing?
a good question. So, I will say this there's never a perfect time. So there are candidates I met maybe 10 years ago that I'll bump into and I'm still thinking of doing that, right? So I think the first thing is there's never enough, there's never a perfect time to do it. There are sometimes better than others. I think it's like, you want to make sure that you have enough. So if you're on the younger side of your career, you have enough experience to contribute and enough clarity to benefit from an MBA. And the schools will help you with that, right? That's not a decision you can make. Sometimes that's the interview, and sometimes we will come back to candidates say, "You're a great candidate. You need another 1 or 2 years to really benefit from an MBA program." But I think timing should fit your career and should fit your personal circumstances for sure. So when I think about career, I go back to that happiness factor. If you're not happy with what you're doing, life is too short.
Mhm.
So, if a lot of us will choose what we do in university in the pathway. I hated my undergraduate degree, but it was something I really liked in high school. And then I got to university and I did not like learning about history. I liked learning about history and watching movies and reading books, but I did not like it in university. And so, sometimes it could be a career path. Maybe you went to university for engineering, you get out and it's like, I don't like this. So, use that happiness factor and also think your personal circumstances. That might come down to when we talk about different formats, right? So, what are those personal circumstances, whether you have family responsibilities or not? Are you able to move to a new city? Things like that. Are you able to do it full time and part time with the financial commitment? And so the personal circumstances have to matter as well.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, right? And I think it also parlays into the conversation around like types of MBA programs, right? Because obviously the big one is the 2 year full-time MBA. And I think that's what everybody thinks of when they think of MBAs. But there's actually a lot more options now. You've got part-time MBAs. You've also just got executive MBAs, which, I think the primary difference there is probably that the intention is you're still at your job. And then online ones too. And so, how can you kind of, first, I'd love for you to kind of distinguish what you feel like
Sure.
each of those categories is
Yeah.
suited for or like best for in terms of like the outcomes that the student wants. but then also talk about, what are the difference in experiences and what could be a good fit for different types of people.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we'll unpack this because I think it's an important one. I think it depends on the type of experience you're looking for, but it also depends on your career goals. So full time MBAs are a very immersive experience, and so you're not having you're kind of immersing yourself. So I always describe it this way: there's two ways to learn languages, right? One, I can download Duolingo and learn a language, or I go live in a country and learn it that way. It's like going to
Mhm.
a country and learning the language. It's immersive and it's also best for career switchers. So, full time MBAs tend to gravitate towards corporate recruiters. No one's working, they're unplugged from their careers. So, you tend to get a lot more access to corporate recruiters. You also have a lot more access around clubs and activities and school events, but it's much more of an immersive experience. And it's really about making sure doors open. And I use an analogy. I think full-time MBA is much more about doors opening. I'll talk about
Mhm.
part-time MBAs and online sort of together. Part-time MBAs and online MBAs offer some flexibility. Part-time MBAs a lot less than online programs, but a part-time MBA sometimes can take 2.5 to 3.5 years. It allows you that ability. I'm going to take a heavy course load here and a lighter course load there. The difficulty with it, you're allowed to retain income. You can apply your learning immediately back in the workplace. So you take an accounting course, you can go back into your workplace and start using it right away. But it's a different type of experience because a lot of full-time MBA programs are cohort experience. You start with the same, end with it. Part-time MBAs are like collecting beads on a string. I got my 20 courses and then here's my degree. But it does offer some flexibility. Online programs offer maximum flexibility, but it requires discipline. So some of
Mhm.
them are synchronous, asynchronous. I could never have done one because I know myself. I would have been like, oh, I don't feel like doing it tonight. I needed that structure. So you have to go into an online program that requires a lot of sort of discipline, but it is the maximum flexibility. And
Mhm.
these are programs, and then I'll talk about executive programs next, but these are programs where it's more about I like my industry and I want to stay in it. I just want to skill up. And a part time MBA fits, and I can retain the income. I can work in the job that I'm doing, and that's making sure doors don't close for you. So it's more about career acceleration than making a career switch. So sometimes we'll have conversations with people that say, I don't want to quit my job, but I want to do a drastic career change. I want to go into investment banking and I'm an engineer and I've always dreamed about. So you have two choices. One is you do a full time MBA or
Mhm.
you change your career goals because a part time MBA is not going to get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's like, do you want that full reset and kind of like fresh start or not? Because I think that's also a big piece of it.
exactly.
Um, and I mean, yeah, I think that you've already kind of covered it, but I'd love to kind of just dig in a little bit on like how you can kind of match your career goals with the format of the MBA. I mean, do you feel like there are certain things that have to be a full-time MBA in order for you to get the kind of career goal that you're looking for?
Yeah, and I'll do it this way, and maybe I'll talk about it this way: is an MBA program. If you want to change your industry and you want to change your function, a full time MBA fits out. If you want to stay in your function but change industries, or if you want to stay in your industry and change functions, a part-time MBA helps. So there are, people that can make a career pivot, but not a drastic career change, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So some of the work that we do early on with candidates when we talk to them is get them thinking about, the formats fit different outcomes and thinking about those.
Yeah, then the next thing I wanted to ask about is just like the trade-offs between each of them. I guess, can you give me like one big upside and one big downside for each type of program?
Oh, that's a great question. So, full time MBA upside is you're immersed in an MBA experience. You
Yeah.
are going to have, you are. living and breathing your MBA studies for, our program is a 1 year program. So for that year, you're living and breathing the MBA program. And so, you're involved in clubs, you're involved in recruitment. And a lot of people go, I like that because it allows me. I remember one person saying last week that I was talking to, they said, I just love coming in and wearing jeans every day. Like,
Right.
of course they dress up for interview, but it's like, I'm having such a great time. So it is, but it's a great time because they've immersed them. So you get access to clubs and everything. And so I think that is the benefit of it. The downside is the obvious one is that you're taking a break on your income for that year.
Hmm.
And the risk factor is a little higher for people there, right? Because it's like I'm actually quitting my job unless they take a leave of absence to do it. They're actually quitting their job to go back and do an MBA program. And there's some nerves around that. So,
Yeah.
and then if you think about online or, part-time MBAs, which can be online or part-time, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, it allows you the ultimate flexibility. It allows you to earn an income. It allows you to
Hmm.
kind of do the studies at your own pace, right? So if you have a busy time at work, you can kind of cut it. But you're going to not basically those programs because you're working full time. And, it's quite easy to add another 25 hours a week commitment in your MBA and you're working full time. You're not going to be
Hmm.
involved in clubs. You're not going to be involved in case competitions because people have their personal life, their work, and now their school on top. And the school is really focused on the classroom learning. You're going to have a very different network because it's spread out, right? It's who you take classes with versus a cohort experience.
Hmm.
I think the downside of it is that it doesn't allow that same immersive experience if you're looking to do a career change that we talked about. I think the other downside, it is very hard for you to transfer credits from one MBA program to another. I mean, we don't take it. It's very hard to find that. So if you're down the pathway in a program and halfway through, maybe you get transferred or you have to move or you have to do something, it's almost like you can't take that learning and apply it to another program.
Hmm.
So, and you see that with professional programs like medicine and dentistry. There's just they're designed as programs versus, credits that I can interchange with. So I think, if you start with an online or part-time program, and I bet you we get a call, an email at least once a week of somebody going, I'm enrolled in a part-time program and I'd love to transfer into your full-time program or another one of your programs, and we can't accommodate it. So I think that's sort of the downsides, but you're sacrificing some of the experience for that flexibility.
Right. Yeah, it's a trade-off for sure. I mean, I think the other part of the trade-off, what I'm curious about too, is how employers treat these different formats. Like, I think that
Good question.
a lot of people, I don't know how to actually, you tell me how common it is that people will say, I got an MBA when really they got an executive one, and they're like trying to kind of make it look bigger than it is. But I mean, then if you talked about your work experience, I feel like it'd be obvious. But anyway, I'm curious kind of like just how employers view the different programs.
So I would say the format matters less to employers than people think. So I'll
Hmm.
start with that headline. So what
Which is
matters to
probably
employers?
good for the more flexible formats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because like,
So employers focus more on school reputation and your abilities, right?
yeah.
So, where and I'll describe it as your ability to articulate what you gain from the MBA program is what matters the most. And
Great.
so sometimes that links back to the decision to do it is what format fits best for me, right? So, I think it matters. Like for all our MBA programs, it's the exact same degree that hangs on the wall. There's no difference. The format and how it's delivered, the outcomes, access to career management, access to extracurriculars are different. But at the end of the day, the piece of paper that you get from the university, there's nothing that distinguishes what's on the wall. So, and that includes our executive MBA and all our MBA programs. So, I think your ability to articulate, what I gain from the MBA is
Mhm.
what's most important.
So if I really, I should just get the Wharton Executive MBA or whatever, the Ivy Executive MBA, and I can put the thing up behind me on my wall, and everyone will think I'm very
Right. No
smart.
one would
Yeah.
notice the difference. So
Yeah. No, that's great. And then I think the next question I have is around, basically just how applicants or aspirants, I guess is technically the term because they wouldn't have applied yet, how they should be thinking about, like, essentially, I don't want to say work-life balance because I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that, if you're doing full-time, it's still a lot of work, but even if you're doing part-time, you're kind of doing more work in a way because you're
yeah,
doing both your
absolutely.
job and you're going to school at night.
And you're balancing
But I,
priorities, right? So that can be
yeah,
difficult too.
yeah. So tell me a bit about just like, how what advice do you have for people kind of in figuring out what are the, what is like the logistical part of like what the best format is for them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is evaluate your time. I think the first thing is to start with, what are you looking to get out of an MBA experience, right? And what matters most to you. And I think that, this is an overwhelming decision. I'm going to start maybe talk about that, right? First of all, to do an MBA and which format that you do. And I think, if you start with that question of what matters most to me out of the experience, that helps guide us a lot better, right? And because that really helps, do I want an immersive experience or do I just, I need the piece of paper and this is, I had a friend of mine who is teaching at a university, is retiring as an accountant and wants, it's retiring early and wants to teach at a university, but he doesn't have a graduate degree. That's what he needs. For him, it's a very purposeful thing. I said, get one that's the quickest thing you can do, right? They don't care about where you're getting it from. They just care that you have the three letters after your name. And so I
Mhm.
said, go to one that allows you to do it quick and the cheapest way, right? Because that's fit his
Right.
goals. So I think, it's starting with that sort of what am I looking to get out of the experience? What matters the most to it? And then that helps us guide. I think the other thing is evaluate time, family support, and work demands. And that's especially if you decide to do a part time MBA is really look at that and then also think about if you're doing a part-time format what your employer is willing to support you on and that they do support you on it because there's going to be a commitment that's there, but I think it's what matters most to me out of the experience and then also kind of think about the demands and the time demands that you have. I'll tell a quick little story as I have a friend of mine that's a very busy person, very busy executive, very busy at home, and he's decided to do a master's of law program. I said,
Mhm.
how are you fitting in the time? He goes, it's easy. I looked at my screen time and I'm spending 20 to 25 hours a week on my phone. If I cut that out, I have 20 to 25 hours a week to work on this Masters of Law.
I mean, I think less about like whether you physically have the time and more like how you want to spend that time, right? Like,
Yeah,
do you want to
exactly.
work 3 hours a night every
Yeah.
weeknight, like in addition to your day job? Some people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
And
the
there's a
alternative is that you
sacrifice. Like,
spend $100,000 on full-time school, right? Is that better? Right? I don't know.
so I did my executive MBA, so I can speak from experience, right? So it was like I'm adding 25 to 30 hours a week on top of my job, on top of my family life. And there's a sacrifice, right? I watched a lot less TV. I outsourced. I love like gardening and yard work. I had to outsource that. What else did I, and every moment counted. So I still took my daughter to dance because she was interested in dance, but I sat in the corner and read cases. But it
Yeah.
was also a feeling of being overwhelmed constantly. I say that to everybody coming to the EMBA program. You will never feel on top of things. And you got to be okay with that feeling.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And now I wanted to get to kind of this, the last thing I wanted to ask about, which is, figuring out like what program is right for you, both just which type of MBA program, but then also the specific school. One of the best ways to do that is to talk to actual people who have been to that program, right? Other customers, let's say.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people that are looking to kind of use these conversations with alumni or even current students to figure out whether it's right for them? Like, what are the things they should be asking about?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I have a couple of suggestions. One is we have a very case-based program, right? So it's a very different way of learning, a very social way. You're solving problems, very discussion-based classroom environment. So I always recommend to people is you want to come and actually sit actual class.
Mhm.
So we do that, right? If people can, right? So We do mock classes and stuff like that. We'll do mock classes online for people that are international to kind of get a sense of it. But if you can come and visit campus and you can sit in a classroom environment, you can pick up a lot about the learning environment. The second thing you'll pick up is how do the students interact with each other? How do the faculty interact with the students? So you get a sense of what the culture is like as well. And you want to leave that class visit regardless of what school. And, a lot of people will kind of start their research and then whittle down to a couple of options, right? And then when you whittle it down is you kind of actually go and visit the school and get a sense of, is this a culture that I feel like I can thrive in and that I belong in, and that's really important. And then the second thing is talking to alumni. And I think asking them some questions. So, and asking them tough questions. So what challenged them? What surprised them? How the MBA has shaped their career? If they had to do it over again, what they would have done. And I think that's really important. But also look for patterns to determine those fits, right? So don't just talk to one alumni, maybe ask to reach out to a few alumni, right? And look at those patterns. And what we do a lot of is, we'll ask the candidate, really try to match them with alumni that match their goals or their background. So if it's an international student, we want an alumni that came and settled in Canada, maybe from their home country. If it's somebody that is an engineer that pivoted into consulting, we'll put in touch with that. So I think that's what's really important too, is you talk to alumni with a similar background that you have.
Mhm. Yeah, and hopefully in the types of programs that you want to be doing or you're interested in comparing.
Yeah,
Because I would imagine among, say, executive MBA programs, there's probably a big difference by school as to like how much networking there is or other things like that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Well, great. Yeah, and then as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here, I just wanted to ask you if there's any questions that we didn't cover today that you wanted to make sure we covered or anything, any kind of parting thoughts here.
I wanna just touch on something. I talk to candidates a lot about this. Is there's a video that I watched probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, a TED talk by somebody called Ruth Chang called "How to Make Hard Decisions," and it's probably a great video of anybody thinking of doing an MBA. This is a hard decision, and it's one that you're going to do once, right? And there are three things she talks about in this video. The first thing Ruth talked about is what makes a hard decision, and she said basically anytime you're doing a pros and cons list.
Mhm.
And even the way that we talk today, there's pros and cons on every program and what you're doing. That's a difficult decision. The second thing she talks about, and I think this is really relevant, is by human nature, if we get overwhelmed by a decision, we tend to default to the easiest thing, not necessarily the best thing for us. And what's the easiest thing about, when you're faced with a tough decision on an MBA program? Not doing one,
Right.
right? Or picking a format that's a little less riskier, right? Like, oh, I don't want to quit my job and have that sort of hanging over my head while I go back to school, but maybe that's not the best decision. So always do that gut check. And the third thing
Mhm.
she talks about at the end of the video is she talks about this aspect of, giving a framework to make a difficult decision. And it really starts with that question we talked about, is what matters most to me? And you got to think about your career goals, the curriculum in a program, but also really, really think about the culture that you're looking for as well.
Right. Well, and it's essentially like you're going to be spending arguably the rest of your life with these people, right?
Yeah,
With like the alumni or whatever you want to call it. So you should like them and you
yeah,
should feel like you fit
exactly.
in
And be
there.
proud of it
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, great. Well, thank you so much.
Enjoyed the conversation very much. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with JD Clarke from Ivey Business School at Western University. And Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free at achievable.me.